the engine that refused to die. It was supposed to fade away, forgotten by time. Yet somehow, this machine kept returning, whispering a truth engineers tried to ignore. Some engines live longer than their creators ever intended. Today, its legacy still shapes the road we drive. Because this is not just a story about metal and fuel. It is a story about resilience, obsession, and the strange moments when a machine outlives every prediction about its fate. To understand how it happened, we must go back to a time when the automotive world faced a quiet crisis. Cars were becoming heavier, more complex, and more demanding. Manufacturers searched for answers, but few imagined a solution would come from an engine dismissed as outdated. Most believed it had reached the end of its evolution. Yet the world was about to change in a way no one expected. At first, engineers treated it as a temporary tool, a bridge to something more modern. But each new challenge revealed another hidden strength. The design was simple, the durability was shocking, the performance curve refused to flatten. Every attempt to replace it failed. Every prediction of its decline collapsed. With every test, it defied expectations and forced experts to ask a question they weren't ready for. Why does this engine refuse to die? Its early years were quiet, unnoticed by most, hidden inside humble vehicles. It earned loyalty not through speed or glamour, but through relentless reliability. Drivers pushed it harder than they should have. Mechanics tried to break it just to see where it would fail. But the limit never appeared. This was the first hint that the industry had underestimated something important. More manufacturers took notice. They studied its structure, its balance, its unusual endurance. And one by one, they realized they had overlooked a masterpiece hiding in plain sight. What began as a practical solution slowly transformed into a symbol of trust and strength. The engine became a silent hero in an era obsessed with innovation. Yet this was only the beginning, because the moment it stepped beyond its original purpose, the real story began. A new chapter opened when engineers pushed it further than it was ever designed to go, and the world would soon discover that survival was only one part of its destiny. What happened next surprised even the people who built it. Once the engine proved it could survive the impossible, engineers began testing how far to climb. They pushed compression, raised temperature thresholds, and demanded power curves no one believed it could deliver. Instead of breaking, it adapted. Instead of weakening, it grew stronger. Every stress test revealed another layer of resilience waiting beneath the surface. Its reputation spread beyond workshops and laboratories. Street racers discovered it could take relentless punishment without hesitation. Long-distance drivers trusted it to cross harsh terrain without a single misfire. Fleet operators realized it could run for hundreds of thousands of kilometers with barely more than routine care. The engine had become something rare. A machine ordinary people could depend on even in extraordinary conditions. As demand rose, a curious shift began inside the industry. New technologies were arriving fast. Electric systems, complex fuel management, and lightweight materials started reshaping the automotive landscape. Most engines struggled to keep up with these demands, but this one embraced them. With each new upgrade, it evolved without losing what made it special. It became a bridge between eras, proving that old foundations could carry modern ambitions. Still, not everyone welcomed its success. Some executives believed its longevity was a threat. A durable engine disrupts business models built on rapid replacement cycles. Others worried it overshadowed more advanced designs. They argued that keeping it alive would slow innovation and distract from future platforms. Their resistance marked the beginning of a quiet internal conflict. The question was no longer whether the engine was reliable. The question was whether it fit the future companies wanted to shape. As debates intensified, the engine continued doing exactly what it had always done: running, surviving, outperforming expectations. Road tests showed fuel efficiency that rivaled newer designs. Durability reports revealed numbers competitors envied. Real-world data made one truth impossible to ignore. This engine had become more than a component. It had become a phenomenon. But beneath all the praise and admiration, a challenge was forming. New regulations were emerging, and they targeted the very qualities that had allowed this engine to thrive. A stricter world was coming, one that demanded cleaner combustion, lower emissions, and lighter footprints. For the first time in its life, The engine faced an obstacle it couldn't simply power through. The collision began quietly, with new laws drafted in distant offices. But soon, their impact echoed across factories, test tracks, and boardrooms. Engineers who once celebrated the engine's resilience now watched as emission targets tightened year after year. The rules were clear. Engines needed to run cleaner, burn less, and evolve faster. This legendary workhorse suddenly looked like a relic standing in the path of a sweeping transformation. Companies scrambled to adapt. They redesigned combustion chambers. They reworked valve timing. They tested alternative fuels that promised cleaner output. Yet no matter how skillfully they refined it, the engine's core identity, its toughness, its simplicity, its unbreakable character, began to clash with a future defined by efficiency and precision. The qualities that made it immortal were now liabilities in a world obsessed with environmental metrics. The conflict grew sharper when new powertrains emerged. Electric motors delivered instant torque without emissions. Hybrid systems blended efficiency with performance. Marketing teams championed futuristic designs that left little room for an old Titan car from steel and stubbornness. Investors wanted momentum. Governments wanted compliance. Consumers wanted modernity. And the engine, silent and steady, faced a world that suddenly demanded it become something it was never meant to be. Inside the industry, arguments intensified. Some saw the engine as a symbol of outdated thinking. It needed to be retired gracefully, replaced by something cleaner, quieter, more politically acceptable. Others refused to surrender. They argued that stability mattered, that millions relied on a machine proven through decades of real-world endurance. They insisted there was still room for an engine that had powered families, workers, adventurers, and dreamers across landscapes where newer technologies often failed. But markets rarely wait for sentiment. Sales data revealed a shift. Customers drawn to efficiency incentives, tax credits, and the allure of cutting-edge systems pushed the old favorite to the margins. Production costs rose as regulations tightened. Manufacturing the engine became an act of defiance rather than necessity. Road tests highlighted the widening gap. Though the engine remained durable, it struggled to meet the new limits without losing the strength that defined it. Engineers tried every trick available: lighter materials, revised mapping, updated injection. But every solution introduced new complications. The engine was being forced into shapes that didn't belong to its nature. Still, something remarkable happened. Even as competitors moved on, a loyal group of drivers refused to let go. They bought the remaining models. They stocked spare parts. They formed communities dedicated to preserving the machine that had carried generations. To them, this wasn't just engineering. It was identity. It was trust. It was proof that some creations deserved to survive not because they were modern, but because they were irreplaceable. Yet loyalty alone couldn't stop the inevitable. The final decision loomed, one that would determine whether the engine's story ended in quiet retirement or transformed into something far more unexpected. The world believed it had seen the last of this legendary machine. But the engine still had one more chapter left to write, and the people who depended on it sensed a coming storm. They didn't know it yet, but a major turning point was approaching. A moment when loyalty, engineering pride, and the unstoppable force of regulation would collide in ways that would reshape its future forever. The final chapter arrived with a moment no one predicted. Just as the industry prepared to close the book, a new crisis emerged, one that exposed the fragility of modern powertrains. Supply shortages disrupted production lines. Complex systems failed in conditions they were never designed to face. Engines built on precision, and software struggled where grit and endurance were required. And in that sudden vacuum, the old legend found its voice again. Mechanics reopened manuals they had nearly forgotten. Engineers dusted off blueprints they once assumed would never be used again. In remote regions, in demanding industries, in places where reliability mattered more than novelty, the engine proved something astonishing. It could still outperform systems decades younger. It didn't need cutting-edge sensors or fragile components. It needed only fuel, air, and a determined heartbeat that had carried it through generations. This unexpected resurgence forced manufacturers to reconsider what they thought they understood about progress. Innovation doesn't always mean replacing the old. Sometimes it means rediscovering the strengths that history tried to leave behind. The engine became a reminder that durability is a form of intelligence, and that simplicity can be a kind of genius in a world drowning in complexity. Its return wasn't triumphant in the traditional sense. There were no headlines, no grand relaunches, no sweeping marketing campaigns. Instead, it survived through quiet necessity, through the people who needed it, through the industries that depended on it, through the places untouched by the pace of modern trends. It lived because the world, in moments of pressure, remembered that reliability is not nostalgia. It is survival. And so the story reaches its climax with a truth hidden beneath decades of engineering ambition. Some machines are not defined by the era they are built in. They are defined by their ability to transcend it. This engine became one of them. It refused to die not because it was perfect, but because it was honest, an unpolished testament to what happens when function meets perseverance. The real legacy of this engine isn't found in horsepower charts or production numbers. It's found in the trust it earned, the journeys it enabled, and the generations it served. In a world racing toward the future, its survival reminds us that progress is not a straight line. Sometimes the past carries wisdom the present still needs. Subscribe to join the journey.